The Pykes, the Pykes, the Pykes are here. What does that mean? So we find out and we realize that this is going to be probably the major threat of Boba. We've already encountered them in the previous episode, right, in the flashback, and now they're here. You know, the general Star Wars fan, the casual fan, may not be aware of who the Pykes are and all that, but the Pykes have been around, you know, in Star Wars for a while now, but maybe we just didn't pay so much attention to them because we just didn't know enough about them. But now we're getting a full-blown reintroduction, or put it more in the forefront, as to the Pyke Syndicate is a syndicate that is very, very deep rooted in, you know, the underground crime syndicates and all that. And digging up some history and backstory, it really turns out that they are huge and they're not to be trifled with, you know. So for the casual Star Wars fan out there who are wondering about the Pykes, I'd like to introduce this little segment called this, Who the Pyke Are You? Let's talk about the Pykes. Let's talk about what I dug up here. And we'll talk about some of the backstory of the Pykes and why they may be very important, especially in this series of Boba Fett. The Pykes are kind of half humanoid, half fish-like species from a planet called Obadiah. Again, if you go back to some of the Star Wars, especially in the Clone Wars, the prequels, you've heard this planet mentioned several times. So Obadiah is one of the Outer Rim territories. Sometime during the Old Republic, a group of them formed a criminal organization known as the Pyke Syndicate. The Syndicate first made its appearance on a season 5 episode of the Clone Wars. Ever since, they have also shown up in The Bad Batch, Star Wars Galaxy of Adventures, and their first live action on-screen kind of debut, so to speak, was in Solo, a Star Wars story. And they've also been featured, of course, in books, comics, and some video games and all that. As we've seen in the previous episode during Boba's flashback, one of their main thing is that they're kind of like spice smugglers. They're traders, right? Yes, spice does exist in Star Wars. I know spice is the major thing in Dune, but enough with the comparisons of Dune and Star Wars. It's very obvious, and it was known for a while, that George Lucas did take a lot of influence from Dune when he was building Star Wars. All right, let's get over it. Spice is something. You know, we've heard of the spice mines on Kessel. You know, even Lando was involved in some of that stuff that we learned, you know, throughout the movies and everything. For example, some of the examples I read, like Han Solo's issues with Jabba began when he dumped the Hutt's spice shipment in order to avoid trouble from the Empire, right? And then Luke Skywalker even grew up believing that his father worked on a spice freighter. So yes, spice does exist, but spice seems to be the main commodity that the Pykes have controlled. You know, the Pyke Syndicate has close ties with the Galactic Empire because of the fact that they were mining a lot of these spices, especially on Kessel. And during the Empire's rule, criminals and political prisoners alike were frequently sent to work as slaves on Kessel mines under the watchful eyes of the Pyke Sentinels, right? So we even get to see a lot of that in Solo. But first, before that, in episode 2, in the prequels, the Pyke Syndicate not only had close ties with the Galactic Empire, but something that was more obvious was the organization had past involvements in crime, such as the disappearance of Jedi Master Sifo Dyas, which you remember was mentioned a lot during Obi-Wan's visit to Kamino. So Sifo Dyas was the man Anakin and Obi-Wan discovered was responsible for commissioning the clone army in Star Wars Episode 2. He was later killed by Count Dooku in the Clone Wars. Season 6 episode of The Lost One, it is revealed that the Pykes helped Dooku keep the death of Sifo Dyas hidden from the Jedi. So again, this is another part of the universe and lore that the Pyke Syndicate was involved in, right? But the Pyke Syndicate hasn't always been aligned with the Galactic Empire, though they haven't been frequently on the side of the Republic either. because during the wars, the Clone Wars, they became members of Darth Maul's Shadow Alliance. This is an organization comprised of criminal families, militias, and Sith warriors that competed with Palpatine's forces for the control of the galaxy. In Clone Wars Season 5, the episode titled Shades of Reason, the Pykes staged an attack on Mandalore as part of the Collective in order to aid the Death Watch militia and Darth Maul take control of that planet. So the Pykes have been involved in a lot of stuff that's happened and that we've actually watched and experienced while watching certain series or movies of Star Wars, right? And then moving on was when we first get to see them in a more live action version of the Pykes. In Solo, the Solo movie, the Han Solo movie, Han and Chewbacca were taken to Kessel by Tobias Beckett in the Millennium Falcon. They were given as slaves by Kira, that's Emilia Clarke's character, to the Pyke leader Quay Tulcidi. I think it's Tulcidi or Tulcite, correct me if I'm wrong or whatever, as part of a plan to steal coaxium for the Crimson Dawn Syndicate, whose boss is Dryden Voss. The heist was successful and left the Pykes to deal with a slave revolt as their foes escaped through the Kessel Run. The infamous Kessel Run. There you have it. That's a brief backstory of how the Pykes were involved in many different facets of the Star Wars universe and how this could be a major thing to deal with in this show, in this series. So basically, like, what does this mean for the Book of Boba Fett, right? Well, because of the deep history of the Pykes and now seeing their prominence, this could basically mean that we can see the return possibly of the Crimson Dawn. Can they possibly be showing up again in this series or in a future iteration or something like that? Could we see the return of Kira? We know that she's still around. The last time we saw her in Solo, she was talking directly to Darth Maul, as we found out that Darth Maul was involved in that syndicate and was the leader at the time, right? So could we see the return of her? Are the Pykes really looking to take over all of Tatooine like they attempted to do with Mandalore? Regardless of what it is, whatever they're planning or how the Pykes are gonna come into play here, they're definitely gonna be the main focus for this series, I think, in my opinion. And like I said before, I think Boba's next move here is to rally up the crime families, put them all together to fight off against them. Very, very interesting stuff there. I hope you enjoyed the history lesson, the Star Wars history lesson. I tried my best to do my research and to share all this information with all of you. I am very interested to hear what you all think about it. I always say, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what I think. What matters most is what all of you think.